Hello everyone, and welcome to today's history video in which we'll be looking at ancient Chinese civilizations. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of how much history we're going to be looking at today, think about it this way. The United States was colonized in 1620 by the Pilgrims. So a lot of what you learn in your United States history classes starts in the year 1620. We are starting in the year 5000 BCE, so it's before Common Era. And so if we're looking at this, 1620, if you go back, you would hit 0, and then you go back another 5,000 years, and that's when our history is starting that we're looking at. So Chinese civilization and Chinese history is a very deep, rich tradition because it has gone on for so long. And because of that, there is so much information to go through, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to go very in-depth today. So today's video is going to be a brief overview of the major dynasties that have ruled over the past almost 6,000 years. We're going to look at some of their major rulers and their main achievements and how different dynasties have gone away and given to the rise of others. And so I keep saying this word dynasty, and what does that mean? So a dynasty is defined as a succession of people from the same family who play a prominent role in business, politics, or another field. So within these ancient Chinese civilizations, we had different families taking control for vast periods of time, and then power would move throughout their family until another family took power and seized control of the country. And so that's what a dynasty is, and we're going to be looking at a lot of those today. Before we start, I just want to say that I have done my research and I am trying my best to pronounce all of these names of the emperors and the names of the different dynasties correctly, but no promises that I will get my pronunciations correct. So apologies in advance if I pronounce anything wrong, but I am trying my best. So the first dynasty we're going to be looking at is the Shah Dynasty. And this existed from 2070 to 1600 BCE. And it was considered to actually be a myth for the longest time because there wasn't much proof about this dynasty's existence. There were originally very small villages and farming communities within the Chinese River Valley that existed during this time period, going back from that date of 5000 BCE. These communities were always in existence, but it wasn't until about 2070 BCE that these communities grew and formed centralized governments, and that's why they are known as the first prehistoric dynasty, and that's what we get the Shah Dynasty from. They are known for developing major bronze work. Their founder was Yu the Great, and so Yu the Great established what is known as a hereditary system of succession. And that's what builds into this idea of a dynasty. Hereditary has to do with family lines. And so Yu the Great established that when he would pass away, his son would take over the role as ruler. The establishment of the hereditary system of succession distinguished this ruler as starting a dynasty. It kickstarted the dynasties to follow as they all sort of adopted this hereditary system of succession. The rulers of the Shah Dynasty were very extravagant. They built grand palaces, and that led to a burden on the common population, which actually resulted in an uprising. And because of this uprising, the Shah Dynasty fell from power in 1600 BCE. Following the Shah Dynasty came the Shang Dynasty. And the Shang Dynasty was in existence from 1600 to 1046 BCE. King Tang was one of the most influential rulers during this dynasty, and he was known because he lowered taxes and alleviated pressures on the common people. This allowed for art and culture to flourish within China at the time. A centralized form of writing was developed under this dynasty, as well as advancements in bronze metalworking, architecture, and religion. And this idea of religion that was brought up during the Shang Dynasty is known as ancestor worshiping. So when someone in a family died, they were thought to have been given divine powers through death. The living family members began to worship their deceased family members and look to them for intercession into different issues, and always look to them for guidance. In 1046, King Wu of the province of Zhou rebelled against the Shang Dynasty and established the Zhou Dynasty. The Zhou Dynasty would then be in existence from 1046 to 256 BCE. King Wu also established what is known as the Mandate of Heaven. This is defined as the gods having blessed a specific ruler and their rule by divine mandate. So when the government no longer served the will of the gods, the government should and would then be overthrown. Power was solidified for centuries to come based off of this mandate of the heaven, which we get from the Zhou Dynasty. Other accomplishments during this time period was that writing was codified and iron metalworking became increasingly sophisticated. Also, the greatest and best known Chinese philosophers and poets, including Confucius, came from the Zhou period. Towards the end of the rule of the Zhou Dynasty and before the next dynasty came into power, we have what is known as the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States. This is typically categorized as being from 772 to 476 BCE. And you'll notice these years actually overlap with when the Zhou Dynasty was considered to be in power, but in actuality, there was so much fighting and rebellion going on that the rulers of the Zhou Dynasty did not have much power at all. This was a period in which rule was decentralized, and various states held power within the different regions. This period was noted for advances in philosophy, poetry, and the arts. And that's because with each of these different areas having their own rulers and ideologies, they were able to separate the ways of thinking and therefore expand upon ideas in different directions. Following the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States came the Qin Dynasty. The Qin Dynasty was in power from 221 to 206 BCE. As you can see, this was a very short-lived dynasty. It's also known as the Imperial Era in China. Shi Huangdi was the sole ruler of the Qin Dynasty, and he ordered the destruction of walled fortifications which had separated the different states that had come up during the Spring and Autumn period. Instead, he commissioned a wall to be built along the northern border of his kingdom. Though little remains today of Shi Huangdi's original wall, the expansions and improvements that have been made constitute what we now call the Great Wall of China. Shi Huangdi also strengthened the infrastructure through road building, which helped to increase trade. He also expanded the boundaries of his empire, built the Grand Canal in the south, redistributed land, and initially was a very fair and just ruler. He was a very popular ruler at the beginning for all of the improvements that he was bringing to the kingdom. But he was also a very strict ruler. He ordered the destruction of any history or philosophy books that did not correspond to legalism, his family line, the state of Qin, or himself. He had this fixation with the afterlife and death, and his desire to provide himself a fitting afterlife led to the commission of a palace built for his tomb. Inside this palace also had an army of 8,000 terracotta warriors created to serve him for an eternity. Following his death, the Qin Dynasty quickly collapsed. The next dynasty, being the Han Dynasty, was in power for about 400 years, that being from 206 BCE to 220 CE. After Shi Huangdi had passed away, there was a very long period of instability and a long drawn-out battle between two generals. Gazu of Han was victorious, and that led to the establishment of the Han Dynasty. During the power of the Han Dynasty, trade with the West began, and arts and technology increased in sophistication. Paper was invented at this time, and writing became more sophisticated because of it. The Han Dynasty embraced Confucianism and made it the exclusive philosophy of the government. This set a pattern which would continue to the present day. Unlike previous leaders, Gazu was tolerant of other philosophical ideas, and as a result, literature and education flourished under his reign. He reduced taxes and disbanded his army, but this never proved to be an issue because so many people were loyal to him. Han Wu the Great, another leader in the Han Dynasty, helped to expand the country, which led to the official opening of the Silk Road in 130 BCE. The Silk Road is one of the most important trade routes in the world. In the year 9 CE, Wang Meng, a regent, spurred a rebellion and overthrew the Han Dynasty. He initially had enormous support from the peasant population, but was opposed by the landowners. His programs, however, were poorly conceived and executed, resulting in widespread unemployment and resentment. Nonetheless, he was able to establish a small dynasty from the years of 9 to 23 CE, known as the Shin Dynasty. So after he died, China was sent into a period of dispute. Various rulers took control in different regions, leading to even more fighting. In the year 208 CE, China was left divided into 3 completely separate kingdoms. These 3 separate kingdoms went on for many years until 589 CE, when the Sui Dynasty came around and successfully reunited China. The Sui Dynasty was in power from that year, 589, to 618 CE. Their main accomplishments were expanding the Great Wall of China, standardizing a system of coins across the realm, and allowing literature to flourish. One piece of literature you may be familiar with from the Sui Dynasty is the legend of Fa Mulan. If that title sounds familiar, that's because it's the story which has inspired Disney's animated picture Mulan. The next dynasty to take power was the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty was in power from 618 to 907 CE. This was considered the golden age of Chinese civilization. They expanded military and building operations, as well as art, specifically sculpture, as well as technology, science, and silverworking flourishing during this time period. With a few modern modifications, the bureaucratic policies that the Tang Dynasty had established are still used in Chinese government to this day. Wu Zetian would become China's first and only female monarch. Empress Wu Zetian was the ruler from 690 to 704 CE. Her main accomplishments were improving living conditions in China, strengthening the position of the empire, and even establishing a secret police. In the year 775 CE, the Anxi Rebellion broke out, and this disrupted the Tang Dynasty and much of China's typical operation. This led to what is known as a period of the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms. This spans from the years 907 to 960 CE. Each regime was claiming itself to be the legitimate ruler of China, which was causing even more disputes until the rise of the Shang Dynasty in 960 CE. The Shang Dynasty is the last dynasty we are going to talk about today, and with the Shang Dynasty, China became stable once again, and many of the institutions, laws, and customs were further codified and integrated into culture. So that is a brief history of ancient Chinese civilization starting in the year 2070 BCE, going all the way up into 960 CE. We have covered hundreds of years, tons of information, and that is only the tip of the iceberg. I challenge you all to pick one of the dynasties that we talked about today. Maybe one was a little bit more interesting or something about it just stuck out among the rest. Do a little bit more research, find out more information, and see what you can find. So that is all for today. Good job, everyone, and keep up the good work.